Thank you for joining us today on Our Village, Our Voices. I'm really excited for our guest today, who's actually my sister, Michelle, and she's a beautiful person, as you'll see. Her story is one that I was really excited to share with the community because it's such a path that she's been on that has really led her to this place in life where she's still in transition of what she's doing with career, and her kids are now teenagers, and the journey that she's been on to get here has been a beautiful and powerful one, and one that I think will resonate with all of us as individuals, just because it's so human. And as women, and as these human women that we are, we have so many similar life experiences, and to be able to grasp onto some of the, I want to say, enlightenment that she's been able to come into, especially this recent time that she's been going through a lot of meditation journeys and delving into what it means to be who we are with the constructs that we put on ourselves and that we take on in life, and how to kind of deconstruct those and then to be at peace with who we are as a person. So I'm excited to be able to share her journey with you and her story, and to have you get a little glimpse of my beautiful sister. So thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Our Village, Our Voices. Today I'm meeting with Michelle Larson, who is Michelle Vile Larson. I am Alicia Vile Beasley, so we are sisters. That's why we look a lot alike. I'm inviting Michelle on to talk today. I feel a little bit narcissistic because it may end up talking a little bit about my life as well, but that's not the point. The point is to explore Michelle as a person and what she's doing with her life now. She's in a very interesting transition. Michelle's always been very good at business and at communication. And so we're going to talk a little bit about growing up and how that shaped her life, and how she has come to where she is now, and what that transition is like for her. So thank you for taking the time today, Shell.
Yeah.
And I might call her Shell, but her name is Michelle.
You can call me Michelle. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about growing up. What was it like growing up, and what was your family setting like, and how did that shape you as a person?
So we grew up in a family with 13 kids, and it was, when you're growing up, you don't realize your family is unique. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe later, talking to more people and realizing, getting more exposure, realize that it's unique. But it was unique in a couple ways. First, it was a big family, and also we have had 7 siblings that are adopted from Vietnam, and so there was a lot of change in our family. It was a busy family. Our dad had just started a law firm that was new and struggling. There wasn't a lot of money. We grew up in what's now what you see right here, but when we moved in, it was a barn. It had a sink and a toilet. Someone had the idea to turn it into a lodge or into a house from a barn, and got that far, and then we moved in and lived with just construction and chaos, and then kids were being adopted, and so new siblings by birth and by adoption, and it was a crazy place, but we didn't know any different.
Yeah.
I remember right out here the first time we moved in, had to go to school. Mom was like hosing us off with a hose.
I don't think I'll ever forget being hosed off. It was so cold. And it didn't really do any good. We were still so dirty when we went to school.
It was crazy. I mean, what I do right now is I run this lodge, and so it's funny. I always feel like I have to tell people, like, I didn't grow up like this.
Yeah.
It was a barn. It was very different. But it was a great life. We were taught to work hard. There was really no choice. There was so much to do,
Yeah.
and so it's a little bit about growing up here and being in a large family. I think my role that I took on was always to be the peacemaker. I was, always trying to. Really help with any conflict that came up. I probably caused more than I helped with, but
Well, when you're little, you're sorting that out.
Yeah.
So how do you think you fell into that role? Was it just placement in the family, or personality, or what is it about about your family situation that you took on that role. Do you remember any specific moment where you're like, I need to really step in here?
Yeah, it's funny. I wonder about that. I mean, I feel like I take on a couple different roles in the family. I'm the one of the oldest by birth, so had time periods of my life where I was the oldest. But right in the middle, I'm the ninth out of 13, so right in the middle as well. So I think it was that middle role that maybe I played, I like fell into the role as peacemaker. And I think also my personality, just, our family another thing I'm realizing is unique in that we talk about everything. We kind of tackle everything. We have a dad who's really intense and kind of taught us to question everything and to argue. And I even remember being in arguments with him and thinking, like, we're on opposite sides of this, but I think he's proud of my argument. I
feel some pride.
Yeah, I feel some pride from him that I crafted a aggressive, decent argument, So I find that to, be something that was difficult sometimes, but also a real gift.
And maybe almost from that, you especially were able to see two sides, like any good attorney can see two sides of every argument. You, from a very young age, could see there are two sides to every argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, again, that I've gone back to school in the last year studying adult development, and that's based a lot on perspective taking. So, when we're born, you'll watch a young child who is a young baby who's like, maybe they're chewing their arm, but they don't even know it's attached to them, So here they are, like, their perspective
is, get this off of me.
Yeah, they're like looking at their hands like, wow, those things are amazing and moving, and don't realize they're the ones doing it.
Yeah.
So we start with this first perspective, and then we realize, oh, there's this other person and they're not me, and they have another perspective. So that's what I'm studying right now. But yeah, realizing that the more perspectives we can take, that systems have their own, way of developing, and, realizing it's not just what I think and what they think, but the cultures that shape us.
So you did communications, and it was at this school with people from all over the world. So what were some of the experiences that you had there, the people that stood out the most to you that really shaped who you are?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other students, it was incredible to study alongside, but really it was a unique experience in that my professors were more like mentors. It was a small university. The class sizes were really small. And basically, I felt like our professors were stripping away the narratives and the layers of who we had created ourselves to be up until that point, and saying really all we are these constructions of who we've, these layers that we've put on over the years. And again, a lot of it coming down to perspective. Like, yes, you are seeing through a lens. Right. This lens is a perspective.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, I think, in a world, it's especially important inquiry for the world that we live in right now, which is becoming increasingly polarized, to realize, like, oh, there's value. These things, that person's perspective, they've built that in a way that's valuable for them, and just respecting someone else's perspective and just seeing that that's what it is. Some of the work that I'm doing now is about understanding my own narrative. So, for instance, we grew up in a family where hard work was how you showed your value, and so I grew up. I'm realizing now I'm 39, realizing like. I don't feel like I'm someone that's inherently worthy of love. That's something to be earned. And I earn that by working hard. So who am I? I'm not worthy of love. Who are others? Someone to prove my worth by working hard and showing them. And these are just these,
so that's how you view other people through this perspective of, oh, I'm going to show you.
Yeah, I'll show you.
You're here. I'm going to show you now.
I'm going to prove how hardworking I am. I don't know. I think we've all had these experiences where maybe you show up, maybe you're in a job situation, let's say, and if I'm carrying that narrative, if that's the narrative that I've that I'm working with, when I don't realize that's my narrative, I might be in a situation where somebody who a boss comes to me and they're frustrated and they're not engaging, and I'm just, my narrative is saying, oh, they don't think I've worked hard enough.
Haven't proved it.
Oh, I haven't proven. What have I done wrong? And then, you walk away just like with carrying that narrative, and maybe the next day you realize they just found out their mom has cancer.
Right.
And that interaction had
me.
Nothing to do with me. Yeah, whatever it is. And so I think we so often do this. We're just walking around like with this big bag of narratives and relating to each other in this way. And so the first thing is realizing what our narratives are, help us to know they're never going to go away. I mean, we'll work with them, we'll get better, but our narratives never go away. So knowing what they are and then working with them and saying, oh, I think I'm bringing that narrative. So let me just watch that in this interaction with them.
Make sure I can step back and
I'm not
see it in a mirror, and
I'm not just projecting all over them.
Projecting, man.
And they're projecting all over me.
And never project on people.
Yeah, Alicia's the only one.
I'm the only one that doesn't. I'm so good at not projecting. Working hard. What was your experience, and where did you kind of have to step back and decide that may not be the route that you should continue to take?
Right. So I had a pretty big, I had an experience that was a wake-up call for me. That wasn't, this is important. Basically 3 years ago, I experienced incredible burnout. So I graduated and went straight into business. So basically we did real estate investment. We'd turn like fourplexes. This was out east. I lived out in Vermont for 10 years, and these old buildings, 200-year-old buildings that had been carved up into fourplexes and had been mismanaged for years, purchased these, did renovations, worked with the tenant profile, and just really dug into the work. And to the point that along the way with these investments, I was often working 80 hours a week. I'd like to get into it in a minute, but my husband Brig, we shifted roles at some point. So he was the primary caretaker. He was still working within our businesses, but when you first started your family, he was working. So when we first started, I was working part-time, but he was the primary, working, money earner. Yeah, and income earner, and I was working part-time, and we were starting these businesses, and it got to the point where they were growing, and it was too big for him to do on our own. So when I had my youngest, I have 3 kids. So when my youngest was 6 months old, we actually shifted, and he was the stay-at-home parent. Again, these were our own businesses, so he was still working, 20 to 30 hours a week as needed, as he could fill in. But he was home with, 3 kids, 4 and under. Yeah. And so my brother-in-law and I took on the businesses, and again we were working ourselves to death. We were working often 80 hours a week, and so 8 years of this, and at the end of it, I think I'd had low-level anxiety maybe, but got to the point where I actually experienced a pretty severe panic attack. And it came on very quickly, and got to the point, it was I was sleeping 5 hours a night, working all the time, and thinking, I was Superwoman. I can do it all. Yeah. I can do this. Like, I'm the one people come to. I just take care of things, and I think I don't need 8 hours of sleep. I'm fine with 5 hours of sleep. Well, maybe it's temporary. Maybe I'll catch up in 5 months when things slow down, and I just think it was my body's way of telling me this isn't how bodies work.
Yeah.
And I had a pretty severe panic attack, and then have had to kind of rebuild since then. So I spent the last 2 years, well, that was 3 years ago. So the first 2 years I was managing it. I immediately went to a friend and said, who I had experienced something similar, and she, instead of taking medication, really worked with meditation and breathing techniques. And so yeah, I was spending so much time managing it through all these techniques that even that was taking all of this energy. And so it's in the last year that I've really realized that maybe this is a midlife crisis. I think it's a midlife crisis to say like, oh, we have choices.
Yeah.
We can slow down.
We can shape our life.
Think about what's important to us. What are we called to? And so the last year I've gone back to school. This school has had a large part of it is meditation and contemplation, along with this like adult development and perspective taking. And so I've really I've really shifted in a lot of ways into slowing down and realizing what some of these narratives are that drive me. So this last year has been slowing down, realizing that when we tap into that inherent wholeness and stillness, that we realize we already have everything we need. We're so full of wisdom. And if we slow down and listen to what we're called to be doing, we'll be in a better place to hear that.
Yeah, that's very powerful. So what's that been like for you? What's that slowing down process been like for you this year? You're doing some school. You've discovered, I mean, you had already discovered meditation, but tell us a little bit about how that's been and what you're discovering through that process.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it, but I mean, so I've started a meditation practice. So at least once a day, I'm meditating for on average 30 minutes, and that practice has helped me to really still my mind enough to tap into this place inside of us that already exists. And we're often so busy that we actually don't even know how to listen to that inherent wisdom inside of us. So
because we're just going from one thing to the next. Constantly
striving. It's this constant striving instead of just stopping long enough to take a moment to tap into that wisdom and stillness. And so part of that practice, like you said, is we have these thoughts that are part of our narrative. And once we realize that those are just thoughts, they aren't who we are, then we can actually learn how to take this stillness that we feel in meditation into our everyday interactions. So for instance, like if I'm, you and I growing up in a family with conflict, and we've had moments where, maybe what's coming up is anger, and to say like, okay, anger is actually not my only option. What is our what narratives and projections are kind of we bumping up against right here, and realizing what letting that come and go, and that anger come and go, and realize that that's not my only option, and so just bringing that kind of those states that we can feel while we're meditating and trying to adapt them into traits in our interactions.
So a lot of people are wondering, like, how do I meditate? People are in this place where, okay, I should be meditating, but how do I do that? What's the best way to start doing that? And so what are some tips or some tools that you can give people that are wanting to incorporate that but don't know how yet?
Okay. So there's I think the most important thing I learned that I use every single day is the 1 minute breath. So you can be anywhere and to stop long enough to take. So the 1 minute breath is trying to breathe in for 20 seconds, hold it for 20 seconds, breathe out for 20 seconds. Okay. And it's something that you practice. When I started, I could maybe do it for 3 seconds in each And so that's a really useful, just something we can do every single day.
And you don't need to be thinking about any certain thing, or you just breathe in, hold it, breathe out.
Yeah, it's something that you can do in a group of people. Something that I've done just while we, that you can do right here.
Yeah.
You're asking me a question, I might be just here taking a breath.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about Brig, your husband, is at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're working, and it's been that way for a while. So what was that transition like for you and for Brig, and how has that worked for your family?
Yeah. So, it's so not only culturally, we're starting to make the shift so that playing field is a little more equalized, but I also grew up in a religious environment that really emphasized really specific family roles. The mother, you might get an education, but that's to fall back on in case your husband, something happens, maybe something really terrible happens, he's sick, and then you'll need to go back to work.
Right.
And so, I kind of grew up with these cultural narratives, and so for me, early motherhood, I love kids. I've always loved kids, babysat at a young age, but I'm naturally nurturing. But early motherhood was really difficult for me. My husband was working, I was supporting him in the business, but I felt like I couldn't get work done, and I also couldn't, parent well. I was trying to just do it all.
Yeah.
And also, I found it to be really, really lonely and unfulfilling. So just being home with the kids, even though they filled me up with so much, they're hilarious. Early, kids saying hilarious things at 2 years old is so much fun, but it was that day long, I was, you get them up, you feed them, you clothe them, you take it, you provide these incredible experiences. You take them to the park, you clean the house, you clean it 5 more times, and they get, your husband gets home and it's still messy, and just it was not rewarding for me. I think it was I wanted to be actively engaged with my mind. I'm drawn to that. And that was really difficult and lonely, and not lonely in that I had the ideal situation. I had 3 sister-in-laws that all had young kids. We were trading kids. We were we had this built-in community that was beautiful. I'm so grateful for that time. But me in particular, I needed something more to keep my mind active. And so when we made that shift, even though the work was hard, I felt relieved. And what's so interesting, so did he. He's actually much more suited to if he's cleaned the house, made an incredible dinner, made sure the kids' backpacks are ready for the next day, he's so fulfilled.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So if we hadn't thought, we can make this shift, if we hadn't just taken that what felt risky for us, and against everything we'd been taught culturally, we never would have experienced some real growth for us. And it was really hard because, even though we felt like it was the right choice for our family, there were still these cultural pressures. Let's say I'd been working all day, had a really long day at work, and we had invited people over for a barbecue at the end of the day, and I'd get home 10 minutes before everyone was showing up and the house was a mess. I felt like they didn't look at that as saying oh, Brig didn't tidy up the house. Again, all this is we're projecting all over each other, everyone all the time. But I would take that I would internalize it. They think I'm a bad housekeeper. I took the whole thing on, all of it. So making that shift there were some growing pains, but it's been the right fit for our family.
So do you feel like you ever worked through that? Because I also was working for a long time, and my husband was the caregiver for our kids. And I feel like I never worked through that. I feel like I carried that the whole 7 years that I was working. I felt like I needed to come home, and then I needed to clean the house, and especially if there was people coming over, I needed to be everything, even though and then now that I've been home more now, and Tucker, my husband's been working more, I understand more because I didn't have that time at home first and then step away. I understand more, like, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, it's impossible for him, it's impossible for me, for any of us to be there. So when do you think you were able to work through that, carrying that and that need, and how did that?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I don't know if we ever fully work through this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we cannot do it all.
Yeah.
So I think letting go of that we can do it all, for me, has been important. I can't do it all. So it's kind of been this balance of being more okay if the house is a mess when people show up, and just and like, you know, be living in that like humanity together. So some of it is that, but some of it has been a really important communication between us to say what works for our family. For me, it's not just this like expectations of other people. Oh, if people come over and see the house, but I have a different level of kind of stillness. Like, I actually need things in a certain order, or like to have things in an order to be able to really rest. Again, some of that is letting that go and just resting without needing the order. But that was different for me than it was for Briggs. So having a really, you know, communication with your spouse to say, wow, I'm feeling attention here for me. And that's this communication piece that's so important. Instead of like, you never clean the house, you don't care about me because you know that this is important to me and you don't do it.
Right.
Instead to say, I'm hurting.
Yeah.
This is hurting for me. Is there a way we can do this differently?
How can we solve this?
What can we shift? What can we help take off each other's plates? Or, you know, again, just say, and that's that narrative. Like, our narratives, if we're not aware of them, then that's when we're doing that projecting, like to say, oh, this is, you know, what are my needs? And then being able to really honestly communicate that without making it someone else's thing.
Yeah. That's such an important piece just in relationships. Tucker and I just recently, he's been standing up to me more, which is great because I could be a bully. And
no way.
No way. Anyway, when I ask him to do something, he knows that my love language is active service. So I love it when people do stuff for me, and so he knows that for me, it's important that he does the things that I'm asking him to do. And I try not to ask him to do too much, but he's been in a lot of pain recently with his back. His ribs been going in and out, and I just, like, I'm so used to him just being and doing everything and having this like amazing body that can do so many things that I'll ask him to do something, forgetting that, and he'll do it anyway because he doesn't want to say no. And so he's recently had to learn, like, okay, I would love to do that for you, but I think it's not a good idea. And I've been so grateful for him to finally be able to say, like, I love you, and this is me telling you that I love you, but I can't do that for you right now.
Yeah.
And I think that we all need to come to a place with our relationships where we can be really honest and still in a very caring way to be able to communicate what each other needs to be able to do for each other and for ourselves.
Yeah.
So we don't lose ourselves.
Yeah. It's what I hear in that too is like finding our voice, and that can be so hard because first we have to realize not to speak from anger, or not to speak, like our voice isn't effective if it's coming from the wrong place. So like really kind of that, maybe that goes back to that stillness, like taking that time to slow down and listen to our bodies. Our bodies are so full of wisdom. They can just be like just taking that breath, and then that can help us making the decision. But then also finding our voice as women. And I've been part of boards where it's all men, and here I am carrying this narrative that I have to be a certain way and prove myself, and just bringing my femininity, or bringing my finding my voice in these spaces, and finding our voice in our relationships, not to annihilate each other, but to really understand each other
and to lift each other. We're talking a little bit about these narratives, these stories that we tell ourselves that then that we project onto everybody. So what are some of the ways that these narratives have played out for you that you've been able to identify and really pull apart?
Yeah. So one of the things that is that our narratives will always give us the evidence that we're looking for. So if we're operating out of our narratives, then we're always going to find evidence for it. If I'm always the victim, I will always find a perpetrator.
Right.
If I'm always angry, I'll always find people to be angry at, that have made me angry.
Yeah.
So, but one of my narratives is caregiving. So growing up in a family where hard work was not just appreciated, but was how whether this was what our parents believed or not, I internalized that in order to be valuable, I had to work hard and to assess a need before it was even recognized as a need by someone else.
Right. Oh man, that's such a thing in our family.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me
I don't think I've even really taken that on and mulled through that one before, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You're valuable by being ready to help someone out before they even know they need help.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful gift. But the flip side to that narrative, I'm finding for me, and has probably contributed to my burnout, is that if I am carrying the narrative that I need to help someone else, who am I in that narrative? I'm the superwoman. I'm the one that's there to help.
Yeah.
But who are they in that narrative? They're somebody that needs help. They're someone that can't inherently help themselves.
Right.
So for me, if I believe that people are already whole and full of wisdom, then if I'm carrying that narrative, I'm not seeing them as whole and full of wisdom. So even I can find evidence all over the place. Even if I'm trying to not be judgmental, I'm judging others as not taking care of themselves. So
how can you reframe that in a way that you can still be someone who is very intuitive and able to figure out what people are going to need without projecting that that they're going to need, that they have to have that help from you?
Yeah,
or that they can't figure that out themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different than being there and providing service. So let me think about it. I think some of it is not being so quick. It's part of that slowing down, not being so quick to jump in. So sometimes, I find this even in business. If I'm in a business, I just came back from a 2-day planning retreat with an organization I'm part of. And if I'm the one who's got the answer, if I'm always the one who's got a solution, then sometimes I'm actually working towards a solution that has shifted for the group. So maybe I'm pushing so hard for a goal to make sure something gets done, or that some action is taken, that I've now pushed something that the group is no longer holding collectively. So to be able to slow down, even just something comes up, not being the first one to jump in and say, here's how we can do that. It's that slowing down.
Just letting it set for a bit.
Letting things settle and see what's emerging for an individual, like two people, for a relationship, seeing what's emerging for a collective, for a group. And the incredible part is that, that's when maybe someone that doesn't speak as much speaks, and you're like, million times better than I would have just said.
When you can finally slow down and listen to somebody next to you who has the answer and they had it 20 minutes ago. And
I'd been steamrolling them the whole time.
Yeah. So on a practical basis, how are you seeing this play out in your life and your professional life? Because you're never going to stop being a professional. I think just same as me, we have this drive to be doing and creating and being part of. And so how do you see this playing out in your life, this education that you're receiving right now?
Well, so I, the business that I've done the past, 15 years, 20 years has been a lot of family business. So with in-laws, with my parents, my husband, we've had a lot of family business. So I am actually making a shift in my professional life to, it's something that I've been doing some of, but to work more with groups So individuals, families in a business dynamic, that I think in a lot of, not just family business, in business in general, a lot of times we think that we're tackling a business problem and all we're doing is talking past each other in our narratives. So we'll be working with groups. So working with groups to, and maybe family business, maybe just any group in conflict. Because like I said, conflict for me, I think this is a unique thing that I carry, is that I actually get energized by conflict instead of nervous about conflict, because to me, the conflict gives us something to work with to get to a better place together. So working with groups in conflict to listen to the language in a way that helps me understand where someone's coming from developmentally, to find ways to help a group listen to each other in a way that they can move past the conflict. And a lot of times they may be working, like I said, they think they're working on a business issue and they're spending so much time on this issue, and once they can understand this conflict that's happening between them, then if they can resolve that, then this business issue, suddenly they can make incredible breakthroughs in their professional lives, but also their personal lives, by understanding each other's narratives.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and it's so cool to see. I mean, when we were younger, you talked a lot about being a mediator, family mediation, that sort of thing. But this is an even greater tool that you've stumbled on through these years of business experience, family business experience, hard times that you've gone through, that you've been able to come out and see and still love the people despite the hard conflicts that you went through, and be able to have this experience of not a standard mediation sort of training, but a training that's very much more encompassing and gives you way more tools than a standard mediation training would give you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what's unique about this work that I'm doing is that a lot of times conflict resolution can focus on the conflict, where this is kind of shining a flashlight to say...
On the people.
Yeah, to shine the flashlight on it. And then once you understand each other's narratives, then you can shine the flashlight a little further to say, look how we can see beyond this and work together. So it's
whereas the actual conflict that they think is the conflict then doesn't even become an issue anymore.
Yeah, you're not
because they're able to talk.
Yeah, and when it's, I mean, the beautiful part of it, and I felt it myself, is that when you get to that center point, you get to that point where you actually can hear each other, and again, our narratives aren't going away, but if we know them and we work with them, and we can almost, like, we see, we're always working through this lens, but it's like we can, like, see the lens. We can, like, take the glasses off and say,
you're like, oh, those are my glasses.
Oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what they're doing. And I kind of, like, I think of it like, it's like you're open. It opens up possibility within us, and, like, within relationships, within groups, and it's that's my passion for this work, is to help people open up to possibility and really experience, again, come home to themselves in a way that they can feel their own wisdom within themselves, and see it in someone else.
Yeah. Well, I am super excited that you have come to this point in life where this is going to be your new focus, because I think I speak for the whole family, and everyone who knows you knows that you have these talents and these gifts that the world needs. And I'm just really grateful that you're able to do this for people now, and that this is the way that your life has taken you. So thank you for going through all the struggles that you have in life and for wading through them in a beautiful, loving way, and for accepting us each in our own differences and the struggles that we go through, and being able to take the time away from your family to learn these tools that you're learning and to be able to share them with the world. So thank you for taking time with us today. I love you.
Love you. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I hope that you were able to feel the things that we were feeling here. They're pretty intense feelings, and be able to relate to that, and be inspired and empowered to find your own truth and to feel the love for yourself, because you are beautiful, just as we all have that beauty in us, at the core, without all of these fluff and other things that we have going on. So I thank Michelle again for joining me today, and I thank you for watching.